The morning sun shone bright over Buckingham Palace. Tourists gathered outside the tall iron gates, cameras ready to capture the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Children pointed excitedly at the red uniformed soldiers standing perfectly still. Parents explained how these guards protected the king and the royal family. Inside the palace courtyard, King Charles III walked slowly across the stone ground. He wore his military uniform with gold buttons and medals that caught the sunlight. Today was supposed to be a normal day. He was scheduled to inspect the royal guard before their ceremony. It was something he had done many times before. The royal guard stood in a perfect line. Their red jackets were spotless. Their tall black hats sat straight on their heads. Their rifles were polished and gleaming. Each guard looked ahead with serious faces, not moving a muscle. They had trained for years to stand this way. Sergeant Michael Thompson stood in the middle of the line. He was a tall man with broad shoulders. His uniform was perfect like always. He had been a royal guard for 15 years. Other guards respected him. Officers trusted him. The royal family knew his face well. Thompson had protected the Queen before she died. He had stood guard during important state visits. He had marched in royal weddings and funerals. His record was perfect. He had never been late, never made a mistake, never caused any trouble. King Charles walked slowly down the line of guards. He stopped in front of each soldier to look at their uniform. This was normal. The guards were used to these inspections. They stood even straighter when the king came close, but something was different today. Palace security officers stood nearby, more than usual. They wore dark suits and had serious expressions. Their eyes watched everything carefully. Some tourists noticed this but thought nothing of it. The king reached Sergeant Thompson. He stopped and looked at the guard for a long moment. Thompson stared straight ahead as he was trained to do. He did not look at the king, he did not move. His breathing was steady and calm. Then something shocking happened. King Charles stepped closer to Thompson. His voice was clear and strong. "Sergeant Michael Thompson," the king said loudly. "You are under arrest." The words echoed across the courtyard. The other guards did not move, but their eyes showed surprise. Palace staff stopped what they were doing. Security officers stepped forward quickly. Thompson's face went pale. His hands began to shake slightly, but he still did not move from his position. Years of military training kept him standing straight. "You are charged with treason against the crown," King Charles continued. His voice was calm but firm. "You are charged with espionage and selling state secrets to foreign agents." Gasps came from the crowd of tourists watching from outside the gates. Cell phones appeared as people started recording. The scene was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. Two security officers moved to Thompson's sides. They were large men in dark suits. One of them spoke quietly to Thompson. "Sir, please place your hands behind your back." Thompson finally moved. His military training told him to follow orders. He slowly put his hands behind his back. The security officer put handcuffs on his wrists. The metal clicking sound seemed very loud in the quiet courtyard. The other royal guards remained perfectly still. Their training taught them to never break formation no matter what happened, but inside they were shocked. Thompson was their friend. They had served together for years. They could not believe what they were hearing. King Charles looked directly at Thompson. "For 15 years you wore this uniform with honor," the king said. "You swore an oath to protect the crown and the people of Britain. Today that oath has been broken." Thompson's eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing. What could he say? The evidence against him must be strong for the king himself to make this arrest. A palace official stepped forward with a folder of papers. These were the formal arrest documents. King Charles took them and read the charges aloud for everyone to hear. "Sergeant Thompson, you are accused of photographing classified security documents. You are accused of sharing information about royal movements with foreign contacts. You are accused of accepting money in exchange for state secrets." Each word hit Thompson like a physical blow. His shoulders sagged slightly. The proud soldier who had stood so straight just minutes before now looked smaller and defeated. The security officers began to lead Thompson away. His military boots made soft sounds on the stone ground. The other guards watched from the corners of their eyes but remained in position. Tourists outside the gates pressed against the iron bars, trying to see better. Many were recording videos on their phones. Others called friends and family to tell them what they were witnessing. News reporters who had come to cover the routine ceremony suddenly had the biggest story of their careers. As Thompson was led toward a police van, he turned his head slightly. He looked back at the palace he had protected for so many years. His eyes met those of his fellow guards. The shame on his face was clear to see. King Charles watched as the van drove away through the palace gates. The crowd of tourists followed its movement down the street. Police cars with flashing lights joined the convoy. In minutes, Thompson was gone. The remaining royal guards were dismissed from their formation. They walked away quietly, their minds full of questions. How had Thompson fooled everyone for so long? What secrets had he shared? How much damage had he done? Palace staff whispered among themselves. They had all known Thompson. He had seemed like such a good man. He was polite to everyone. He worked hard. He never complained. How could he have been living a double life? King Charles remained in the courtyard for several minutes after everyone else had left. He looked at the spot where Thompson had stood. The betrayal hurt deeply. The royal family had trusted this man with their lives. He had been inside their most private moments. He had known their schedules, their movements, their security arrangements. The king thought about all the times Thompson had been on duty. State visits from foreign leaders, private family gatherings, important ceremonies. Thompson had been there for all of it, watching, listening, and apparently remembering everything for the wrong reasons. News of the arrest spread quickly around the world. Television stations interrupted their regular programs. Newspaper websites published breaking news alerts. Social media exploded with videos and comments from the tourists who had witnessed the shocking scene. By evening, the story was on every news channel in Britain and beyond. Royal experts tried to explain what had happened. Security specialists discussed what this meant for the safety of the royal family. Politicians called for investigations. But in the quiet of Buckingham Palace that night, King Charles knew that everything had changed. The trust that held the monarchy together had been broken by one man's greed and betrayal. Tomorrow would bring difficult questions and hard decisions. Tonight he could only think about how different things would have to be from now on. The next morning, Scotland Yard held a press conference. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Williams stood behind a podium filled with microphones. Cameras flashed as reporters filled every seat in the room. The whole world wanted to know more about Sergeant Thompson's arrest. Inspector Williams was a serious woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had worked on many important cases, but nothing like this. The arrest of a royal guard for treason was something that happened maybe once in 100 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I can now share some details about Operation Crown Shield." The room became very quiet. Even the camera operators stopped moving. Sergeant Michael Thompson had been under surveillance for 6 months, Williams continued. MI5 agents first noticed suspicious activity in January. Thompson was accessing areas of the palace he had no reason to visit. He was also taking photographs with a hidden camera. A reporter raised her hand.
"How did you discover he was a spy?"
Williams looked at her notes. It started with money. Thompson's bank account showed deposits that did not match his military salary. Large amounts of cash appeared every few weeks. When our financial team investigated, they found the money came from foreign sources. The room buzzed with whispers. Thompson had seemed like a normal soldier with normal pay. Nobody had suspected he was getting rich from selling secrets. Thompson was very careful, Williams explained. He used different bank accounts in different countries. He thought he could hide the money trail, but our experts are very good at following money no matter how well hidden. Another reporter stood up. What kind of information was he selling? Security protocols for royal protection, Williams answered. Maps of the palace showing secret entrances and exits. Schedules of when the royal family would be in specific locations. Details about how many guards were on duty at different times. The reporters wrote quickly in their notebooks. This information could have put the entire royal family in danger. Foreign agents or terrorists could have used it to plan attacks. Williams clicked a button and a large screen showed photographs. These images were found on Thompson's hidden camera. They show classified documents, security equipment, and restricted areas of the palace. The photographs were shocking. Thompson had taken pictures of alarm systems, guard rotation schedules, and even the layout of the king's private rooms. He had photographed everything a criminal would need to break into Buckingham Palace. How long was this going on? Asked a reporter from the BBC. We believe Thompson started selling information about 3 years ago, Williams replied. But he may have been gathering intelligence for even longer. We are still investigating the full timeline. 3 years was a long time. In those 3 years, Thompson had access to countless royal events. He had been present for state visits, family celebrations, and private meetings. The amount of sensitive information he could have gathered was enormous. Williams showed more evidence on the screen. Thompson used encrypted communication apps to contact his handlers. He thought these messages could not be read by British intelligence. He was wrong. The screen showed copies of text messages. Most were in code, but MI5 experts had broken the secret language. The messages showed Thompson receiving instructions about what information to collect. They also showed him asking for more money. Thompson was not working alone, Williams revealed. He was part of an international spy network. We have identified at least 4 other people in different countries who were buying information from him. This news made the story even bigger. Thompson was not just a soldier who made a mistake. He was part of a professional spy operation that threatened national security. A reporter from Sky News asked, which countries were involved? Williams paused before answering. I cannot reveal all details while the investigation continues, but we have evidence of involvement by agents from at least 2 countries that are not friendly to Britain. The room erupted with more questions. Everyone wanted to know which countries, but Williams would not say more. National security meant some information had to stay secret even from the press. How did you finally catch him? Another reporter asked. Thompson made a mistake, Williams explained. Last month, he tried to photograph a new security system being installed in the palace. But he did not know that MI5 had already placed cameras to watch him. We recorded him taking the pictures. The screen showed grainy video footage. It was clearly Thompson, still in his guard uniform, using a small camera to photograph a control panel. The timestamp showed it was taken just 2 weeks before his arrest. This video gave us the final proof we needed, Williams said. We could show that Thompson was actively gathering classified information for foreign agents. That is the legal definition of treason. A reporter asked about the timing of the arrest. Why did King Charles arrest Thompson himself instead of waiting for police? William smiled slightly. His Majesty wanted to send a clear message. Betraying the crown is the most serious crime in Britain. When a royal guard commits treason, the king himself has the right to make the arrest. This explanation helped people understand why the arrest had been so dramatic. King Charles was not just angry about Thompson's crimes. He was showing that the monarchy would personally fight against anyone who betrayed the country. What about the other royal guards? A reporter asked. Were any of them involved? We have investigated every guard who worked with Thompson, Williams answered. So far, we have found no evidence that anyone else was involved. Thompson appears to have worked alone within the palace. This news brought some relief. The idea that multiple guards might be spies would have been even more frightening. At least Thompson seemed to be the only traitor among the royal guards. Williams showed financial records on the screen. Thompson received over £200,000 during the past 3 years. The money was paid in cash deposits made in different cities across Europe. £200,000 was a huge amount of money for a soldier. It was more than Thompson could earn in 5 years of normal military service. The money showed how valuable his information was to foreign intelligence agencies. Thompson lived modestly, Williams continued. He did not buy expensive cars or houses. Most people who knew him had no idea he had this much money. He was very careful not to attract attention. This detail made Thompson's betrayal even more puzzling. He had not used the money to live like a rich man. He had saved most of it, perhaps planning to disappear after he retired from the military. A reporter asked about palace security. How will this affect protection for the royal family? Palace security is being completely reviewed, Williams answered. New procedures are being put in place to prevent this from happening again. The royal family's safety remains our top priority. Williams could not give details about the new security measures. That information had to stay secret to keep the royal family safe. But everyone understood that major changes were coming. When will Thompson go to trial? Asked a reporter. The trial will begin in approximately 3 months, Williams replied. Thompson will face charges of treason, espionage, and violations of the Official Secrets Act. If convicted, he could face life in prison. Life in prison was the maximum sentence for treason in Britain. It showed how seriously the government took Thompson's crimes. He had not just stolen money or property. He had betrayed his country and put the royal family in danger. As the press conference ended, reporters rushed to file their stories. The investigation had revealed that Thompson's betrayal was much worse than anyone had first thought. He was part of an international spy network that had been stealing British secrets for years. That evening, news programs around the world covered the story. Security experts explained how dangerous Thompson's actions had been. Royal biographers discussed what this meant for the monarchy. Politicians called for stronger laws against treason, but the most important question remained unanswered. Why had Thompson done it? What had made a decorated soldier with 15 years of faithful service decide to betray everything he had sworn to protect? That answer would have to wait until Thompson decided to speak. Guard Captain James Morrison could not believe what he was hearing on the television. He sat in his small apartment, watching news reports about his friend and colleague Michael Thompson. The man he had known for over 10 years was being called a traitor and a spy. Morrison had served alongside Thompson since they both joined the Royal Guard. They had trained together, stood watch together, and shared countless conversations during long duty hours. Thompson had always seemed like the perfect soldier, dedicated, honest, and completely loyal to the crown. This has to be a mistake, Morrison said to himself. But deep down he knew it was not. The evidence was too strong, and King Charles himself had made the arrest. At the Royal Guard barracks, other soldiers were having similar conversations. Corporal David Hughes had been Thompson's roommate for 3 years. They had shared meals, stories about their families, and dreams about their futures after military service. Michael never acted strange, Hughes told the other guards. He got up at the same time every day. He polished his boots, cleaned his rifle, and followed every order perfectly. If he was a spy, he was the best actor in the world. But as the guards talked more, small details began to make sense. Thompson had often volunteered for extra duty shifts, especially during important royal events. He had always been eager to work when foreign leaders visited the palace. The other guards had thought he was just very dedicated to his job. "Remember how he always carried that small notebook?" asked Guardsman Peter Collins. He said he was writing down important military procedures to study later. But maybe he was recording secrets to sell. The guards remembered the notebook. Thompson wrote in it almost every day. He said it helped him remember the complex security protocols they had to follow. Now they wondered what he had really been writing. In the nearby town where Thompson lived, his neighbors were equally shocked. Mrs. Eleanor Davies lived next door to Thompson's small house. She had known him for 5 years and considered him a quiet, polite young man. Michael was the perfect neighbor, Mrs. Davies told reporters who came to interview her. He kept his garden neat, never made noise, and always said hello when he saw me. He helped me carry groceries when my arthritis was bad. I cannot believe he was living a secret life. Thompson's house looked completely normal from the outside. It was a small 2-bedroom home with a tiny front garden. The paint was fresh, the windows were clean, and nothing suggested that a spy lived there. Even his car was ordinary, a 5-year-old sedan that he kept very clean. But when police searched the house, they found a different story inside. Hidden in a secret compartment behind his bedroom closet, investigators discovered professional spy equipment. There were tiny cameras no bigger than buttons, listening devices that could be hidden anywhere, and communication equipment that could send encrypted messages anywhere in the world. Detective Sergeant Paula Reynolds led the search team. She had investigated many criminals' homes, but Thompson's house was unusual. Most criminals' houses show signs of their illegal activities, she explained to her team. But Thompson kept his spy work completely separate from his normal life. In Thompson's kitchen, police found normal food and ordinary dishes. His living room had a regular television, some books about military history, and photographs of his time in the Royal Guard. Everything looked like the home of a typical soldier. The photographs were particularly interesting. They showed Thompson at royal ceremonies, standing proudly in his red uniform. There were pictures of him with other guards, smiling at the camera. One photograph showed him shaking hands with King Charles during a medal ceremony 3 years earlier. He looked so proud and happy in these pictures, Detective Reynolds noted. It is hard to believe he was already planning to betray the same people he was sworn to protect. Thompson's bedroom was equally normal. His bed was made with military precision. His uniforms hung neatly in the closet. His boots were polished and arranged in perfect rows. Only the hidden spy equipment revealed his secret life. Police also found financial records hidden in a locked box under his bed. The papers showed bank accounts in 3 different countries and detailed records of payments received for information. Thompson had been very organized about his spy work, keeping careful track of every transaction. The records showed that Thompson's spy career had grown over time. His first payments were small, only a few £100 for basic information about guard schedules. But as he proved his reliability, the payments grew larger. By the end, he was receiving thousands of pounds for detailed security plans and royal movement schedules. Sarah Thompson, Michael's younger sister, was devastated when police came to question her. She lived 2 hours away and only saw her brother a few times each year, but she had always been proud of his military service. Michael was always the good child, she told the police through her tears. He studied hard in school, never got in trouble, and always wanted to serve his country. When he joined the Royal Guard, our whole family was so proud. How could he throw all of that away? Sarah remembered that Michael had seemed worried about money recently. When their father died 2 years earlier, Michael had paid for the entire funeral without explaining how he could afford it. At the time, Sarah thought he had saved money from his military salary. Now she realized the money probably came from his spy activities. He paid for Dad's funeral, bought Mom a new car, and even helped me with my mortgage payments, Sarah explained. I thought he was just being a good son and brother. I never asked where the money came from. Thompson's mother, Margaret, was 74 years old and lived in a care facility. The police decided not to tell her immediately about her son's arrest. She was proud of Michael's military service and often told other residents about her son who protected the king. Learning about his betrayal might be too much for her to handle. At the Royal Guard training facility, instructors tried to understand how they had missed the signs. Thompson had been considered a model soldier throughout his career. His performance reviews were always excellent. He had never been disciplined for any offense, large or small. Colonel William Hartwell had been Thompson's commanding officer for 8 years. Michael was everything we want in a Royal Guard, the colonel told investigators. He was professional, reliable, and completely dedicated. If someone had told me one of my guards was a spy, Thompson would have been the last person I would have suspected. The colonel reviewed Thompson's military file, looking for any warning signs he might have missed. Thompson had received commendations for his service. He had been promoted ahead of schedule because of his excellent performance. There was nothing in his record that suggested he might become a traitor. The only unusual thing was how much overtime he volunteered for, Colonel Hartwell admitted. But we saw that as dedication, not suspicious behavior. We were happy to have a guard who wanted to work extra hours during important events. Thompson's fellow guards were struggling to accept the truth about their colleague. Many had considered him a friend. They had shared personal stories with him, trusted him with their own secrets, and relied on him during dangerous situations. We told Michael everything, admitted Corporal Hughes. We talked about our families, our fears, our plans for the future. He knew all of our personal business. Now I wonder if he was gathering information about us too. The guards began to remember conversations differently. Thompson had always asked lots of questions about their duties, their training, and their observations about palace security. At the time, they thought he was just interested in doing his job well. Now they wondered if he was collecting information to sell. Some guards felt angry at Thompson for betraying their trust. Others felt sorry for him, wondering what had driven him to make such terrible choices. All of them felt uncertain about who they could trust in the future. How do we know there are not other spies among us? Asked Guardsman Collins. If Michael could fool everyone for years, maybe others are doing the same thing right now. This fear was spreading throughout the Royal Guard. The investigation had shown that one person could cause enormous damage by pretending to be loyal while secretly working for enemies. The guards realized they would have to watch each other more carefully and question behavior they had always accepted as normal. As more details emerged about Thompson's double life, the picture became clearer. He had been living as 2 completely different people. During the day, he was Sergeant Michael Thompson, loyal protector of the crown. At night, he was a professional spy selling his country's secrets to the highest bidder. The most frightening part was how well he had hidden his true nature. If Thompson had not made that one mistake with the security camera, he might have continued his spy work for many more years. The damage he could have caused to British national security was almost impossible to calculate. King Charles sat in his private office at Buckingham Palace, surrounded by the most important security officials in Britain. The room was filled with tension as everyone tried to understand how badly Thompson's betrayal had damaged royal security. Director General Patricia Mills from MI5 spread photographs across the large wooden table. Each picture showed classified information that Thompson had stolen over the past 3 years. The images were disturbing proof of how much damage one person could cause. Your Majesty, Director Mills began, Thompson had access to virtually every aspect of palace security. He knew guard rotation schedules, alarm system codes, secret entrance locations, and emergency evacuation procedures. King Charles studied the photographs with a grim expression. Some showed detailed maps of the palace with security cameras marked in red ink. Others displayed guard duty rosters with handwritten notes about when certain areas would have reduced protection. "What does this mean for my family's safety?" the king asked directly. Commissioner James Bradley from the Metropolitan Police answered, "Sir, we must assume that hostile foreign agents now have detailed knowledge of how we protect the royal family. Every security protocol that Thompson knew must be considered compromised." The word compromised hung heavy in the air. It meant that 3 years of carefully planned security measures were now useless. Enemy agents could use Thompson's information to plan attacks, kidnapping attempts, or assassination plots. Chief of Palace Security, Richard Vaughan, looked exhausted. He had not slept since Thompson's arrest, working around the clock to assess the damage. "We are implementing emergency security changes immediately," he reported. "All access codes have been changed. Guard schedules have been completely restructured. New communication protocols are being established. But changing security measures was not enough. The royal family's entire way of life had to be reconsidered. Public appearances that had been routine for decades might now be too dangerous. Travel plans that used to be kept moderately secret now required maximum security precautions. How could this happen? King Charles asked the question everyone was thinking. How did one man gain access to so much sensitive information without anyone noticing? Director Mills had been investigating this exact question. Thompson was trusted completely, she explained. Guards with his length of service and perfect record are given access to information that newer guards never see. He used our own trust against us. The irony was painful. Thompson's excellent service record had actually made him more dangerous as a spy. Because he had never caused any problems, security officials had given him more and more access to classified information. His trustworthiness had become the very weapon he used to betray the crown. Colonel Hartwell from the Royal Guard explained the military perspective. In the military, we build teams based on trust and loyalty. Guards must rely on each other completely, sometimes in life-or-death situations. Thompson violated the most fundamental principle of military service. King Charles asked about the other royal guards. Can we trust the men who are protecting us right now? Every guard is being reinvestigated, Commissioner Bradley assured him. We are conducting new background checks, financial reviews, and psychological evaluations. No one will be cleared for duty until we are completely satisfied of their loyalty. This process would take weeks or even months. In the meantime, the royal family would be protected by a smaller group of guards whose loyalty was absolutely certain. It meant reduced public appearances and more restrictions on royal activities. Director Mills presented another serious concern. Thompson's information is probably being shared among multiple foreign intelligence agencies. Even if we identify all of his direct contacts, the information could spread to other hostile groups. This meant the security threat would continue long after Thompson was in prison. Terrorist organizations, foreign governments, and criminal groups could all potentially access the stolen information. The damage would continue to grow even though the source had been stopped. Security advisor Helen Crawford raised an additional worry. Other Commonwealth countries are requesting immediate security reviews. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are concerned about upcoming royal visits. King Charles was scheduled to visit Canada in 3 months and Australia later in the year. These trips now required completely new security planning. The old procedures that Thompson knew about could not be used anymore. We need to inform our allies about the security breach, the king decided. They have a right to know that their own security may be compromised during royal visits. This decision would have diplomatic consequences. Foreign governments would lose confidence in British security capabilities. Some might even ask for their own security teams to take primary responsibility during royal visits, which would be embarrassing for Britain. Director Mills showed classified reports from foreign intelligence services. We have intercepted communications suggesting that at least 3 countries are actively using Thompson's information. They are studying our security weaknesses and possibly planning operations against British interests. The scale of the problem was becoming clear. Thompson's betrayal was not just a threat to the royal family. It was a threat to British national security that could affect diplomatic relations, intelligence operations, and military preparedness around the world. What about palace staff? King Charles asked. How many people had access to the same information as Thompson? Security Chief Vaughan consulted his notes. Approximately 200 people have some level of access to classified security information. This includes guards, police officers, palace staff, and government officials. 200 people was a manageable number for investigation, but it would require enormous resources. Each person needed detailed background checks, financial investigations, and security interviews. The process would take months and cost millions of pounds. We also need to consider technology solutions, Director Mills suggested. Thompson used traditional methods, cameras, notes, and personal observation. Modern surveillance technology might help us detect future threats. King Charles was interested in this approach. What kind of technology? Advanced monitoring systems that can track unusual behavior patterns, Mills explained. Cameras that use artificial intelligence to identify suspicious activities. Communication monitoring that can detect unauthorized information sharing. But technology solutions raised privacy concerns. Guards and staff would have to accept much more intensive surveillance as part of their employment. Some might find this level of monitoring unacceptable and choose to leave their positions. Commissioner Bradley presented the legal challenges. Thompson's case will be the most important treason trial in decades. The evidence must be presented carefully to ensure conviction. Any legal mistakes could allow him to escape proper punishment. The pressure to get the legal case right was enormous. If Thompson was found not guilty because of legal errors, it would send a terrible message to other potential traitors. It might also compromise ongoing investigations into his spy network. I want to testify at his trial, King Charles announced. This surprised everyone in the room. Sir, that would be highly unusual, Commissioner Bradley warned. Royal testimony in criminal cases creates precedent and security concerns. But King Charles was determined. Thompson's betrayal was personal as well as professional. He violated a sacred trust. I want to explain to the court and the public what his actions mean for the monarchy and the country. Security Advisor Crawford raised practical concerns. Your Majesty's testimony would require extensive security measures at the courthouse. It would also attract massive media attention that could overshadow the legal proceedings. Despite these concerns, King Charles felt strongly about testifying. Thompson had not just committed crimes against the government. He had betrayed the personal trust that the royal family placed in him every day. Director Mills presented the final concern. We must assume that Thompson was not the only spy in British institutions. His success may have encouraged others to attempt similar operations. This was perhaps the most frightening possibility. If one royal guard could become a spy, there might be others in the military, government, or security services. Thompson's case could be just the beginning of a larger problem. How do we prevent this from happening again? King Charles asked. The answer was complex and expensive. It would require new security procedures, advanced technology, increased background investigations, and continuous monitoring of personnel. The cost would be enormous, but the alternative, another security breach, was unacceptable. As the meeting ended, King Charles realized that Thompson's betrayal had changed everything. The monarchy's relationship with its protectors would never be the same. Trust that had been built over centuries had been shattered by one man's greed. The most immediate challenge was maintaining royal duties while implementing massive security changes. The public expected the royal family to continue their work, but that work now carried risks that had been unimaginable just days before. King Charles looked out the window at the tourists gathering outside the palace gates. They came to see the pageantry and tradition of the British monarchy. In Washington, D.C., the secure briefing room deep beneath the White House buzzed with urgent activity. CIA Director Robert Chen spread classified documents across the table as he briefed President Martinez about the Thompson case. The implications for American security were more serious than the public realized. Madam President, Director Chen began, Thompson's stolen information included details about joint security operations between British and American forces. Our own protection protocols for your upcoming state visit to London may be compromised. President Martinez had been planning to visit Britain in 4 months to strengthen the alliance between the two countries. Now that visit faced serious security questions. If hostile foreign agents knew how the British protected visiting heads of state, they could use that information to plan attacks against any world leader visiting London. What exactly did Thompson know about American operations? The president asked. Chen consulted his classified briefing notes. Thompson was present during 3 American presidential visits over the past 5 years. He had access to joint security briefings, evacuation procedures, and communication protocols. He observed how our Secret Service coordinated with British forces. This information was extremely valuable to enemy intelligence services. They could use it to understand not just British security methods, but American ones as well. The damage extended far beyond Britain's borders. National Security Advisor Dr. Lisa Park raised additional concerns. Intelligence agencies around the world are scrambling to assess what Thompson might have known about their operations. Every country that has worked with British security forces is potentially affected. The Thompson case was creating a crisis of confidence in international intelligence cooperation. Countries that had shared sensitive information with Britain now worried that their secrets might have been sold to their enemies. In Ottawa, Canada, Prime Minister David Rousseau held an emergency meeting with his security advisors. As a Commonwealth nation, Canada frequently hosted members of the British royal family. The Thompson betrayal meant that decades of carefully planned security procedures might be useless. Governor-General Harrison is supposed to host Prince William next month, the Prime Minister noted. Do we have any idea what security information Thompson might have shared about royal visits to Canada? Royal Canadian Mounted Police Commissioner Sarah Mitchell had been working with British authorities since Thompson's arrest. Thompson was briefed on security procedures for royal visits to Commonwealth countries, she reported. He knew about backup evacuation routes, local police coordination methods, and communication systems we use during royal tours. This meant that Canada would have to develop entirely new security procedures for the prince's visit. Local police forces across the country would need retraining. Venues would require additional security sweeps. The cost and complexity of royal visits had suddenly multiplied. In Canberra, Australia, similar conversations were taking place. Foreign Minister Patricia Wong was reviewing all planned British royal visits for the next 2 years. Australia's intelligence service was working frantically to determine what information Thompson might have possessed about their security capabilities. We have to assume that our standard protection methods are now known to hostile forces, Intelligence Director Mark Stevens told the Foreign Minister. Every procedure we have used during previous royal visits must be considered compromised. Australia had planned a major royal tour, featuring several members of the royal family visiting different cities over 3 weeks. The complexity of protecting such a large-scale visit using completely new security procedures was almost overwhelming. In Brussels, the European Union called an emergency meeting of intelligence chiefs from member nations. Even countries that were not part of the Commonwealth were concerned about the Thompson case. Many European nations had security cooperation agreements with Britain that could be affected. This is not just a British problem, stated EU Intelligence Coordinator Dr. Hans Muller. Thompson's information could compromise security operations across Europe. Any nation that has shared intelligence with Britain must review their own vulnerabilities. European intelligence agencies began reviewing every piece of information they had shared with British forces over the past 3 years. Phone calls, encrypted messages, and joint operation reports all had to be examined to determine what Thompson might have accessed. In Moscow, foreign intelligence officials were studying the Thompson case with great interest. While Russia was not involved in Thompson's spy network, they recognized an opportunity to exploit the chaos his betrayal had created. Russian intelligence analyst Viktor Petrov prepared a confidential report for his superiors. The British security apparatus is in disarray, he wrote. This is an excellent time to test their defenses and gather additional intelligence while they are rebuilding their systems. Similar assessments were being made in Beijing, Tehran, and Pyongyang. Countries that were normally suspicious of British Intelligence capabilities saw Thompson's betrayal as proof that even the most trusted institutions could be penetrated. The international intelligence community was facing a crisis of trust that extended far beyond the specific information Thompson had stolen. If a decorated royal guard with 15 years of perfect service could become a spy, who else might be working for foreign powers? In Tel Aviv, Mossad Director Rachel Cohen was reviewing all Israeli intelligence sharing agreements with Britain. Israel's security depended heavily on cooperation with allied intelligence services, but Thompson's case raised questions about how well any country could protect shared secrets. We have provided Britain with some of our most sensitive intelligence over the years, Director Cohen told her senior staff. If that information was accessible to someone like Thompson, our own operations could be compromised. This concern was shared by intelligence agencies around the world. Countries began restricting what information they shared with British forces until new security procedures could be established. The isolation was damaging Britain's ability to combat international threats. The economic implications were also significant. International businesses that relied on British security assessments for their operations began questioning whether those assessments were still reliable. Insurance companies that covered high-profile events in Britain started increasing their rates. Lloyd's of London, the famous insurance market, held emergency meetings to assess the financial impact of the Thompson case. Events insured by Lloyd's included royal ceremonies, state visits, and international conferences that could all be affected by compromised security information. The Thompson betrayal has increased the risk level for any high-profile event in Britain, explained senior underwriter Margaret Fields. We have to assume that hostile forces now have detailed knowledge of standard security procedures. This risk assessment affected everything from sporting events to business conferences. Organizations planning events in Britain found that security costs had suddenly increased dramatically as insurance companies demanded additional protection measures. At international terrorism experts were particularly concerned about the Thompson case. Dr. Ahmed Hassan, a terrorism specialist at Georgetown University, warned that Thompson's information could be used by terrorist groups to plan attacks. Thompson knew details about crowd control, emergency responses, and evacuation procedures, Dr. Hassan explained in a classified briefing to international security officials. This information could help terrorists plan attacks designed to cause maximum casualties. Terrorist organizations that had previously found British security too difficult to penetrate now had detailed intelligence about potential weaknesses. The Thompson case had effectively provided them with an instruction manual for attacking British targets. Counter-terrorism agencies around the world began sharing information about potential threats more aggressively. If terrorist groups were planning to exploit Thompson's intelligence, early warning would be critical to preventing attacks. The diplomatic consequences were also severe. Countries that had planned to host British royal visits began quietly suggesting that those visits should be postponed. The embarrassment of publicly canceling royal tours would damage Britain's international prestige. Foreign Secretary James Wellington found himself making urgent phone calls to counterparts around the world, trying to reassure them that British security remained reliable despite Thompson's betrayal. "We understand your concerns," Wellington told the Canadian foreign minister during one difficult conversation, "but we are implementing comprehensive new security measures that will actually make royal visits safer than they were before." These assurances were met with polite skepticism. Foreign governments had their own domestic political considerations. Hosting British royalty during a security crisis could make their own leaders appear reckless with public safety. The Thompson case was also affecting British business interests abroad. Companies bidding on international contracts found that clients were questioning whether British firms could adequately protect sensitive information. Defense contractors were particularly affected. In the gray concrete walls of Belmarsh Prison, Michael Thompson sat alone in his cell. 3 weeks had passed since his dramatic arrest at Buckingham Palace. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on him like a physical force. Sleep came rarely, and when it did, nightmares filled his mind with images of the king's disappointed face and his fellow guards' shocked expressions. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Williams entered the prison's interview room carrying a thick file of evidence. She had been trying to get Thompson to explain his actions since his arrest, but he had remained silent. speaking only through his lawyer. Today felt different. Thompson had asked to speak with her directly. Thompson looked older than his 38 years. The confident royal guard who had stood proudly at palace ceremonies was gone. In his place sat a broken man wearing prison clothes, his hands shaking slightly as he faced the detective across the metal table. "I want to tell you everything," Thompson said quietly. His voice was hoarse from weeks of barely speaking. "I cannot live with this guilt anymore." Inspector Williams turned on her recording equipment and read Thompson his rights again. Even though he wanted to confess, the law required proper procedures to ensure his statement could be used in court. "Why did you do it, Michael?" Williams asked gently. She had interviewed thousands of criminals, but something about Thompson's case felt different. He was not a typical traitor motivated by ideology or hatred. There was real pain in his eyes. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, as if each one caused him physical pain. "It started with my daughter, Emma," he began. 3.5 years ago, she was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder. The doctor said she needed experimental treatment that was not available on the National Health Service. Williams listened carefully. Thompson's personnel file mentioned his daughter, but there had been no indication of serious medical problems. "The private treatment cost £50,000, Thompson continued. "I had some savings, but not nearly enough. My wife Sarah was working 2 jobs and I was taking every overtime shift I could get. But it was not enough money and Emma was getting sicker." Thompson's voice broke slightly as he spoke about his daughter. Williams could see genuine love and fear in his expression. This was a father who had been desperate to save his child. "How did you first make contact with foreign agents?" Williams asked. Thompson rubbed his face with his hands. "I never intended to become a spy. I was at a pub near the barracks, drinking alone and worrying about Emma's medical bills. A man approached me and started a conversation." Williams made notes as Thompson described the encounter. Intelligence agencies often recruited assets in exactly this way, finding people with financial problems and offering solutions. The man said his name was David, but I am sure that was not his real name. "He seemed to know things about me, that I was a royal guard, that I had money troubles, that my daughter was sick." "He offered to help. What kind of help?" Williams prompted. "At first, he just offered to pay for Emma's treatment. He said he represented wealthy people who liked to help military families in need. It seemed like charity, not espionage." Thompson explained how the mysterious man had paid for Emma's first round of experimental treatments. The money came through a complicated system of international transfers that made it difficult to trace. Thompson was so grateful for his daughter's life being saved that he did not ask too many questions. "When did they first ask for information in return?" Williams asked. "About 6 months later," Thompson replied. "David contacted me again and said his employers wanted a small favor in return for their generosity. They just wanted basic information about guard schedules and palace routines." Thompson described how the request started small and seemed harmless. His handlers asked for information that was not technically classified, things like how many guards were on duty during public ceremonies or what time shifts changed. "I told myself it was not really spying," Thompson admitted. "The information they wanted was things that anyone could observe by watching the palace. I convinced myself I was just repaying a debt to people who had saved my daughter's life. But the requests gradually became more serious. Thompson's handlers began asking for classified information about security procedures, alarm systems, and royal family schedules. Each time Thompson hesitated, they reminded him about his daughter's continued medical needs. Emma required ongoing treatments every few months, Thompson explained. Each treatment cost thousands of pounds. The doctors said that without the medicine, she would die within a year. I felt trapped. Williams understood the psychological pressure Thompson had faced. His handlers had created a situation where refusing their demands meant letting his daughter die. It was a cruel form of blackmail disguised as charity. "When did you realize you were committing treason?" Williams asked. Thompson was quiet for several minutes before answering. "I think I always knew, but I refused to admit it to myself. When they asked me to photograph classified security documents, I knew there was no way to pretend this was anything other than espionage." Thompson described the internal struggle he had faced. Every time he photographed classified information or made notes about royal security, he knew he was betraying everything he had sworn to protect. But the alternative was watching his daughter die. "Did you try to stop?" Williams asked. Many times, Thompson replied, but they made it clear that stopping was not an option. They said they had evidence of everything I had already done. If I stopped cooperating, they would expose me and I would go to prison anyway. Then Emma would die and my family would be destroyed. This explained why Thompson had continued his spy activities for so long. His handlers had trapped him in a situation where he felt he had no choice but to keep betraying his country. "Tell me about your daughter's condition now," Williams said. Thompson's face brightened slightly for the first time during the interview. "She is doing much better. The experimental treatments worked. Her blood tests have been normal for over a year now. The doctors say she has an excellent chance of living a normal life." This news created a bitter irony. Thompson had destroyed his own life and damaged his country's security to save his daughter. Now that she was healthy, his sacrifices seemed even more tragic. "Do you regret what you did?" Williams asked. "Every single day," Thompson replied immediately. "I betrayed the king, my fellow guards, and my country. I violated every oath I ever took. I know that what I did was wrong, but I could not watch my daughter die when I had the power to save her." Williams asked Thompson to describe his emotional state during the years he was spying. He explained how the stress had affected every aspect of his life. "I could barely sleep," Thompson said. "Every time my phone rang, I thought it might be someone who had discovered what I was doing. Every time I stood guard duty, I felt like a fraud. I was protecting people I was simultaneously betraying." Thompson described how he had become increasingly isolated from his fellow guards. He could not maintain close friendships when he was living such a massive lie. The camaraderie that had always been important to him became impossible to enjoy. "My wife knew something was wrong," Thompson continued. "I became distant and moody. I could not tell her about the spy work, so I made up excuses about being stressed at work. Our marriage suffered because I could not be honest with her." Williams asked about Thompson's financial situation. He explained that most of the money he received went directly to pay for Emma's medical treatments. He had tried to save some money for his family's future, but the majority was spent on keeping his daughter alive. "I never bought expensive things or tried to live like a rich man," Thompson said. "I was afraid that spending the money would make people suspicious. So I lived modestly and saved most of it for Emma's ongoing medical needs." "What about the other people in your spy network?" Williams asked. "Who else was involved?" Thompson provided detailed information about his handlers and the methods they used to communicate. He described meeting procedures, payment systems, and the types of information they requested most frequently. "I never met anyone else who was selling information," Thompson said. "My handlers made sure I worked alone. They said it was safer that way, but I think they wanted to prevent spies from comparing notes about how they were being treated." Thompson's information helped Williams understand how the spy network operated. It was professionally run with careful security procedures designed to protect the handlers while keeping the assets isolated and dependent. "Is there anything else you want to tell me?" Williams asked as the interview drew to a close. Thompson looked directly at her with tears in his eyes. "I want King Charles to know that I never intended to hurt him or the royal family personally. I have served the crown faithfully for 15 years. The man who betrayed those secrets was not the real Michael Thompson. He was a desperate father who made terrible choices." Thompson paused and took a deep breath. "I also want my daughter to know that I love her more than life itself. Everything I did was to keep her alive. I hope someday she can understand why her father became a traitor." As Williams gathered her papers and prepared to leave, Thompson made one final request. The Old Bailey courthouse in London had never seen security like this before. Armed police officers stood at every entrance. Metal detectors screened everyone entering the building, and snipers were positioned on nearby rooftops. The trial of Michael Thompson for treason had captured the attention of the entire world. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of reporters from dozens of countries set up their equipment. Television news trucks lined the street for 3 blocks. Protesters holding signs both supporting and condemning Thompson gathered behind police barriers. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Inside the historic courtroom, Judge Patricia Blackwood called the proceedings to order. At 67 years old, she was one of Britain's most experienced judges. But even she had never presided over a treason trial involving the royal guard. The weight of history filled the ancient courtroom. "This court is now in session for the trial of Michael James Thompson," Judge Blackwood announced. "The defendant stands charged with treason against the crown, espionage, and violations of the Official Secrets Act. Thompson sat in the defendant's dock wearing a dark suit instead of his familiar Red Guard uniform. He looked pale and thinner than during his arrest 3 months earlier. His wife Sarah sat in the public gallery, her face showing the strain of the past months. She had stood by her husband despite everything, though their marriage had been severely tested. The prosecution was led by Sir Richard Pemberton, one of Britain's most skilled barristers. His opening statement laid out the case against Thompson in clear, devastating detail. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sir Richard began, "this case concerns the most serious crime possible in our legal system: treason against the Crown. The defendant, a sworn protector of the royal family, systematically betrayed his country for money." Sir Richard displayed photographs of the classified documents Thompson had stolen. The jury saw detailed security plans, guard schedules, and palace layouts that Thompson had sold to foreign agents. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. For 3 years, Michael Thompson lived a double life. The prosecutor continued. By day, he stood guard over the people he was sworn to protect. By night, he sold their secrets to the highest bidder. There is no greater betrayal of trust imaginable. Thompson's defense was led by Elizabeth Morrison QC, a respected barrister known for taking difficult cases. Her strategy was not to deny Thompson's crimes, but to explain the circumstances that had led to them. "My client stands before you as a broken man," Morrison told the jury in her opening statement. "He is guilty of the crimes charged, but his actions were driven by desperation, not greed." When faced with his daughter's life-threatening illness, Michael Thompson made terrible choices that he regrets every day. Morrison displayed photographs of Thompson's daughter Emma during her illness. The images showed a pale, weak child connected to medical equipment. Several jury members looked visibly moved by the pictures. "This is not a case about an evil man who hated his country," Morrison continued. "This is about a loving father who was manipulated by professional intelligence operatives when he was at his most vulnerable." The first week of testimony focused on the evidence against Thompson. MI5 officers testified about the surveillance operation that had caught him. They showed video footage of Thompson, photographing classified documents, and described the sophisticated spy network he had been part of. Detective Chief Inspector Williams took the stand to present Thompson's confession. She read portions of his statement where he admitted to selling state secrets and described his recruitment by foreign agents. The defendant showed detailed knowledge of his crimes, Williams testified. He provided specific information about his handlers, payment methods, and the types of intelligence he provided. There was no doubt about his guilt. The prosecution also called Thompson's fellow royal guards to testify. Their testimony was particularly painful to watch. These men had trusted Thompson with their lives and had considered him a friend and colleague. Guard Captain Morrison took the stand with obvious reluctance. "Michael was like a brother to me," he testified. "We served together for 10 years. I trusted him completely. Learning about his betrayal was the most shocking experience of my military career." Morrison described how Thompson had used his position to gather intelligence. He volunteered for extra duties during important events. He asked detailed questions about security procedures. "At the time, we thought he was just dedicated to his job." The captain's voice broke slightly as he continued. "Michael knew all of our personal information, our families, our fears, our plans for the future. We shared everything with him. Now I wonder if he was gathering intelligence about us too." Other guards testified about Thompson's behavior during his spy activities. They described how he had become more distant and secretive over the past few years. Several mentioned that he had seemed stressed and worried, but they had attributed this to normal work pressures. The prosecution's most dramatic moment came when they presented financial evidence showing the money Thompson had received. Bank records displayed over £200,000 in payments from foreign sources over 3 years. This was not a man stealing bread to feed his family, Sir Richard argued. This was a professional spy earning substantial sums for betraying his country's most sensitive secrets. The defense phase of the trial began with emotional testimony from Thompson's family. His wife Sarah took the stand to describe their daughter's illness and the desperate financial situation they had faced. Emma was dying. Sarah testified through tears. The doctor said she had less than a year to live without experimental treatment. The NHS could not provide the medicine she needed. We were facing the choice between bankrupting our family and watching our daughter die. Sarah described how the mysterious benefactors had first approached them. They seemed like angels sent to save our daughter. They paid for Emma's treatment without asking for anything in return. We were so grateful that we did not ask enough questions about who they were or why they wanted to help. The jury listened carefully as Sarah explained that she had not known about her husband's spy activities. Michael never told me how he was repaying these people. I thought he was just doing extra work or had gotten a bonus. I had no idea he was selling state secrets. Medical experts testified about Emma's condition and the experimental treatments that had saved her life. Dr. Helena Richards, the specialist who had treated Emma, explained the severity of the girl's illness. Without the experimental medication, Emma would have died within months, Dr. Richards testified. The treatment was not available through normal medical channels in Britain. The cost of the private treatment was approximately £50,000 initially, with ongoing costs of several £1,000s every few months. The doctor's testimony helped the jury understand the impossible situation Thompson had faced. His daughter's life had literally depended on finding money that his military salary could never provide. Emma herself, now 12 years old and healthy, did not testify directly, but a video statement was played for the jury. In the recording, she spoke about her illness and her love for her father. "Daddy told me he was sick when I was little," Emma said in the video. "He said people helped us get medicine to make me better. I do not understand why Daddy is in trouble for trying to save my life." The child's innocent words had a powerful impact on the courtroom. Several jury members wiped away tears, and even Judge Blackwood seemed moved by the girl's statement. The most anticipated moment of the trial came when King Charles himself took the stand. The courtroom was completely silent as the monarch entered to testify. It was unprecedented for a sitting British monarch to testify in a criminal trial. King Charles wore a dark suit instead of royal regalia, but his presence commanded the courtroom's complete attention. He took the oath solemnly and faced Thompson directly as he began his testimony. "Michael Thompson served the crown faithfully for 15 years, the king began. "I personally reviewed his service record before this trial. He was decorated multiple times for exceptional duty. He had earned the trust and respect of everyone in the royal household." The king paused and looked directly at Thompson, who kept his eyes down. That trust made his betrayal all the more painful. "Thompson had access to the most sensitive information about my family's security. He knew details that could have been used to harm the people he was sworn to protect." King Charles described the personal impact of Thompson's betrayal. "A royal guard's oath is sacred. These men and women literally place their lives between the royal family and any threat. When one of them betrays that oath, it violates something fundamental about the relationship between the crown and those who serve it." The king's testimony was brief but powerful. He did not express hatred toward Thompson, but rather deep disappointment and concern for the damage done to the institution of the monarchy. During cross-examination, defense attorney Morrison asked the king about the pressures faced by royal guards and their families. "Your Majesty, do you believe that the crown has a responsibility to ensure that those who serve it are not placed in impossible financial situations?" Morrison asked. King Charles considered the question carefully. The jury deliberated for 3 days. In the cramped jury room at the Old Bailey, 12 ordinary British citizens struggled with one of the most difficult decisions any jury had ever faced. They had to balance Thompson's undeniable guilt against the extraordinary circumstances that had driven him to betray his country. Jury foreman David Hartley, a 52-year-old teacher from Manchester, led the discussions. "We all agree that Thompson committed the crimes," he told his fellow jurors. "The evidence is overwhelming. But the question is whether his motives should affect his punishment." Some jurors felt sympathy for Thompson's situation as a desperate father. Others argued that treason was treason, regardless of the reasons behind it. The debates were intense and emotional, with several jurors admitting they were torn between their hearts and their heads. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered each day waiting for the verdict. Public opinion was deeply divided. Polls showed that while most British citizens believed Thompson was guilty, many also felt some sympathy for his impossible situation. Parents especially understood the lengths someone might go to save their child's life. On the 3rd day of deliberations, the jury reached their decision. The courtroom was packed as Judge Blackwood called the court to order. Thompson stood as the jury foreman prepared to announce the verdict that would determine the rest of his life. On the charge of treason against the crown, how do you find? Judge Blackwood asked. Guilty, Your Honor, Hartley replied clearly. On the charge of espionage, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. On the charge of violations of the Official Secrets Act, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. Thompson closed his eyes as each guilty verdict was announced. His wife Sarah sobbed quietly in the public gallery. The weight of his crimes and their consequences was finally complete, but the jury had also prepared a statement that they asked to be read in court. Foreman Hartley stood to deliver their recommendation. Your Honor, while we find the defendant guilty of all charges, we wish to express our belief that his actions were motivated by love for his daughter, rather than greed or malice toward his country. We recommend that the court consider his extraordinary circumstances when determining his sentence. Judge Blackwood thanked the jury and dismissed them. She scheduled Thompson's sentencing for the following week, giving her time to consider the complex factors involved in the case. During that week, letters poured into the court from around the world. Some demanded harsh punishment for Thompson's betrayal. Others pleaded for mercy, arguing that any parent would have done the same thing in his situation. The case had touched something deep in the human conscience about the conflict between personal loyalty and national duty. When sentencing day arrived, the courtroom was again packed. Judge Blackwood had clearly spent considerable time preparing her statement. She spoke for nearly an hour, explaining the legal principles and moral considerations that had guided her decision. Michael Thompson, Judge Blackwood began, you have committed the most serious crime in our legal system. Treason strikes at the very heart of our democracy and our way of life. Your actions endangered not only the royal family, but potentially countless other British citizens. Thompson stood silently as the judge continued. However, this court must also consider the extraordinary circumstances that led to your crimes. You were not motivated by ideology, hatred, or personal gain. You were a father facing an impossible choice between your daughter's life and your duty to the crown. Judge Blackwood paused before announcing the sentence. I hereby sentence you to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years, contingent upon your continued cooperation with authorities and your demonstrated remorse for your actions. The sentence was severe, but not the maximum possible punishment for treason. Some legal experts had predicted Thompson could receive life in prison. The possibility of parole after 15 years suggested that the judge had been influenced by the unique circumstances of his case. Thompson accepted the sentence without emotion. He had expected to spend the rest of his life in prison, and was almost relieved that he might someday be free to rebuild his relationship with his daughter. In the weeks following Thompson's sentencing, King Charles announced sweeping changes to royal security procedures. The reforms were more comprehensive than anything implemented in the past century. The Thompson case has taught us that traditional security measures are not sufficient for modern threats. The king announced in a rare public statement, we must adapt our procedures to address new challenges while maintaining the openness that has always characterized the British monarchy. The new security protocols included enhanced background investigations for all palace personnel. Financial monitoring systems would track any unusual income or spending patterns among guards and staff. Psychological evaluations would be conducted annually to identify individuals who might be vulnerable to recruitment by foreign agents. Technology played a major role in the security improvements. Advanced surveillance systems were installed throughout the palace to monitor behavior patterns and identify suspicious activities. Communication monitoring would detect any unauthorized sharing of information. The changes also included improved support systems for military families facing financial hardship. A new fund was established to provide emergency assistance for medical expenses and other crises that might make someone vulnerable to foreign recruitment. We cannot prevent every personal crisis, explained Palace Security Director Richard Vaughan, but we can ensure that those who serve the crown have alternatives to betraying their country when they face difficult situations. The Royal Guard itself underwent significant restructuring. New rotation policies ensured that no single guard would have access to sensitive information for extended periods. A buddy system was implemented to encourage guards to watch out for each other's welfare and report any concerning behavior. Training programs were expanded to include education about foreign intelligence recruitment techniques. Guards learned to recognize when they might be targeted by hostile agents and how to report such approaches to security officials. The international response to Thompson's case also led to improvements in intelligence sharing protocols. Allied nations developed new procedures for protecting sensitive information while maintaining necessary cooperation in security matters. The Thompson case was a wake-up call for intelligence agencies around the world, explained former CIA Director Robert Chen. It showed that even the most trusted institutions can be penetrated by determined adversaries. New verification procedures were implemented for personnel with access to classified information. Regular polygraph examinations became standard for high-security positions. Financial monitoring systems were enhanced to detect suspicious income sources more quickly. The case also led to changes in how intelligence agencies handled the families of personnel with security clearances. Support programs were expanded to help families deal with financial crises, medical emergencies, and other situations that might make someone vulnerable to foreign recruitment. 6 months after Thompson's sentencing, Emma Thompson visited her father in prison for the first time. The 12-year-old girl had been shielded from most of the media attention surrounding her father's case. But she was old enough to understand that he was in serious trouble. "Daddy, I know you did something wrong to save my life," Emma told her father during their brief visit. "I wish you had not had to do that." Thompson struggled to explain his actions to his daughter. "I made terrible choices, Emma. I hurt a lot of people, including you and Mommy. I hope someday you can forgive me." Emma's response was simple and heartbreaking. "I forgive you, Daddy, but I wish you had asked me first. I would rather have died than have you become a bad person." Those words haunted Thompson more than his prison sentence. His daughter's innocent wisdom showed him that he had made the wrong choice, even though his motives had been pure. The Thompson case continued to influence British security policy for years to come. Annual reviews ensured that the lessons learned from his betrayal were not forgotten. Security procedures were regularly updated to address new threats and vulnerabilities. Perhaps most importantly, the case led to a cultural change in how the royal household viewed its personnel. The old system of unquestioning trust was replaced by a more realistic approach that recognized human vulnerabilities while still maintaining necessary security. King Charles often reflected on the Thompson case in the years that followed. In private conversations with his security advisors, he emphasized that the goal was not to eliminate all risk, but to create systems that could identify and address problems before they became catastrophic. "Michael Thompson served us faithfully for 15 years, the king once observed. His betrayal was devastating, but it also taught us valuable lessons about the complexity of human loyalty and the need for comprehensive support systems." The monarchy emerged from the Thompson crisis stronger and more secure than before. The painful experience of betrayal had forced necessary changes that made the institution more resilient and better prepared for future challenges. Thompson himself continued to serve his sentence at Belmarsh Prison, working in the prison library and participating in rehabilitation programs.